Hello there and welcome to the Alberta Update, a first-hand look at what's happening in your province. I am your host, Bruce McAllister. Thank you for being with us today. Coming up on the program, we will have Ministers Amery, Schulz, and Neudorf. We'll be talking about the Sovereignty Act. We'll be talking about the price of power, how to keep it low, and looking forward to talking to Minister Schulz too about some of the dealings in Ottawa. But first, as we always try to, we say good day to the Premier. Nice to see you, Premier, again. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Bruce.
Hey, we've got a few topics to cover today, so let's start with this one. Your Justice Minister introducing a motion this week under the Sovereignty Act within the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act. Couple of things here that you're doing. Number one, you are protecting gun owners, lawful gun owners, and you're also protecting citizens who choose to protect their families. I'm not sure you should have to do that, but you are. Explain why, Premier. How does this work?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think if people remember from a few years ago when Edward Maurice fired some shots to people who had broken into his house, and then he ended up going through a lengthy process before the Crown determined that there was no reasonable likelihood of conviction. More recently, we saw in Ontario, somebody who had been broken in on was an intruder carrying a crossbow. He responded with a knife, and now he's going through a lengthy court process. We think people have just had enough with the bad guys, and so we believe that it says quite clearly in the law that you have a right to use reasonable force to defend your home and family. And so we are going to make sure that it is not a policing priority nor a prosecution priority. And that was the direction that our Justice Minister has given to the various agencies that do this law enforcement. Same thing for law-abiding gun owners. They bought their guns legally in good faith. And the last thing we want our policing resources or our Crown prosecutors doing is wasting their time going after law-abiding citizens. Let's go after the bad guys there too. We've got plenty of gangs and organized crime and people who are up to no good. That's where our policing and our prosecution priority should be. And so we passed a motion in the legislature to affirm that. And it is one of the things, one of the powers that we have as a province, that yes, the federal government can put forward criminal code sanctions as part of their constitutional jurisdiction. Well, we're responsible for administration of justice and policing. And so we can exercise our jurisdiction by declining to make that a priority for policing or prosecution.
Yeah, still remarkable, Premier. So many Albertans want to see this, that you actually have to do it. But I know so many people thanking you for it. Listen, a new poll telling you what I think most people already suspected, and that is the support for your memorandum of understanding with Ottawa is off the charts in Alberta. It's even very popular in the entire country. So what does that say to you? And at the same time, how do you ensure, because we've dealt with Ottawa for a long time, it hasn't been a great decade, that you continue to hold the Prime Minister and his government's feet to the fire?
I mean, I know people are skeptical. It's been 10 bad years and accelerating with terrible years for the past 4 years prior to the change in government. And it's going to be a lot of proving ground. That it's one thing to have a memorandum of understanding. It's another thing to execute on that. But I can tell you there's been two immediate changes that we've been asking for a long time. And one is to just say that we were going to suspend the emissions cap. We know that an emissions cap with the kind of timelines that the former Prime Minister had put on us would have resulted in a production cap, and we wouldn't have been able to increase our barrels that come out of the ground. That's gone. We also knew with the clean electricity regs that we needed to get rid of those as it applies to Alberta, because most of our power grid is fueled by natural gas. It would have impaired our ability to not only build the power that we need, but also to attract new AI data centers. So those two things alone would have been success. We ended up getting 7 of the 9 bad laws that I was concerned about addressed. We have a little bit more work to do on plastics, a little more work to do on cars, but that to me is going to have a major improvement in our overall investment climate. And then we'll work together to get the Pathways project going at the same time as we get a bitumen pipeline to the Northwest BC coast. And I think that those are projects that are going to benefit not just us, but all of Canada. So I'm glad that message is getting through. I think that that our fellow Canadians have seen that the way in which Alberta has been treated and our industry has been treated is unfair. And I think Canadians have a real sense of fair play and fairness. So I'm very pleased to see that the majority of Canadians are rooting for us. We just have to make sure that the government is held to account at the national level to stand up to their commitments.
Something tells me you will do that. You'll be happy to know, Premier, your Environment Minister, Rebecca Schulz, and your Justice Minister, Mickey Amery, are coming up on the program as well to flesh out some of these things a little bit more. Hey, you did a virtual town hall this week with Alberta teachers. You know what's great about that, and I know you know this, is you get to speak to teachers directly. You can hear from them directly. What did you learn from that virtual town hall?
Well, I think that there's I'll tell you one of the things that I learned is that sometimes it takes the province to step in and tell people it's okay to have the uncomfortable conversations. When one of the examples that I have given about why it is we need to address aggression in the classroom is just the stories I'm hearing of class clearings where all the kids are told to leave the classroom when there's a kid who's violently acting out. Hearing stories of teachers being punched or kicked or bitten and to the point where they need surgery. We wouldn't put up with that in any other workplace. Why are we putting it up with it in our schools? And so we're giving teachers a safe place to tell us what's really going on and what they think the solutions are. And there are some kids, quite frankly, who are going to need one-on-one attention until they can self-regulate, probably outside of a regular classroom. And then others who are going to need more one-on-one attention to learn English, because we've got a lot of English language learners. And we're going to just try different approaches to make sure that we're creating a classroom environment that is stable, that is calm, that is manageable for the teachers. That's what our objective is. And I'm just very grateful that they're prepared to be so honest with us and telling us their accounts. But we've got to solve these problems. That's the bottom line.
You bet. I'll leave you with this question, or we'll let you go after this question. You spoke to the Canadian Association of Energy Contractors. It was a luncheon in Calgary this week. I was there. It was fabulous. One of the things that struck me was when Mark Schulz, the CEO, the president there, said that 247 Alberta families directly impacted when it comes to employment by every rig. That is astronomical. Good for them. They were very appreciative of the work that you're doing. What was your takeaway from that group?
Well, that one group, and they also work with EPAC, the Explorers and Producers Association of Alberta as well, who represent a lot of the big producers. What we've seen in oil sands development, increasingly our barrels are heavy oil barrels. But you know what we've noticed is that they can increase their production, but it doesn't necessarily mean they increase the number of people on the ground doing the work. Whereas the conventional oil and gas sector, when you roll out a rig, it has all of that spin-off effect that Mark Schulz was talking about. One of the arrangements that came out of our memorandum of understanding is that we can use some of that CO2 that we're going to be capturing for enhanced oil recovery. There's about 40 different fields that we think will be able to inject CO2 in to get greater production. They're doing this already with great effect. In Saskatchewan with the Weyburn project, I think they've safely sequestered 40 megatons of CO2, but they've also brought new life to those fields. And those are going to have a compounding effect in various communities. When you get a bunch of hardworking folks coming to a community to drill a new well, they need to be in hotels and they eat at the restaurants and they fill up at the gas station. And so that's part of the reason why we're very excited that we now have an opportunity to really work towards doubling our oil and gas production so that it can benefit all Alberta communities. And so I think that we're on the right track.
You bet. I know they're excited about it over at Enhance as well, where they do it near Clive, and you're certainly well aware of that one. Premier, thank you again. Another crazy busy week for you. Great to do this. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right. Here's our Premier, Danielle Smith, on the Alberta Update. So much going on for so many ministers right now in Alberta. The Justice Minister may be the busiest minister with the Premier. There is Justice Minister Mickey Amery taking some time to join us again today to discuss a few things. Minister, I know how busy your schedule is. Thank you. We appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely honored to be here. Thank you.
Few things I'd like to ask you about. The Premier touched on some of them in our discussion, but you can add some context. The Sovereignty Act introduced. This is really a pushback against Ottawa, and I guess an assurance to law-abiding citizens and gun owners that you, the province, will not be encouraging police officers in any way to confiscate their guns.
Yeah, essentially and effectively, that's really what it is. Yesterday, we tabled the motion in the Alberta legislature, and it really says in unequivocal terms that Alberta simply does not agree with the misguided approach of the federal government in targeting honest, law-abiding gun owners in this province.
So, what difference does it make if you're a gun owner watching this right now? You're a hunter. What difference does it make for them?
Well, look, we've said time and again, law-abiding firearms owners are not the ones that are causing serious crime to run rampant across our nation. Those who are using guns to commit crimes are not calling Ottawa to turn in their banned firearms because of this program. And the ones who have done everything right, the ones who have taken the safety courses, the ones who have submitted their credentials to be thoroughly vetted, those are the law-abiding, honest Albertans that are being disproportionately targeted by this program. So we've said from day one, targeting innocent law-abiding firearms owners in our province is not the solution to gun violence in our country. The feds have dedicated nearly $750 million to this program, and we know that it will not do a single thing to curb crime here in Alberta. Everyday responsible gun owners can take comfort in knowing that our province stands by them. We will protect them from this scheme, and we will do everything possible, everything legally that we have available to make sure that the feds do not come into Alberta to interfere with the rights of honest Albertans to their property.
So many people will be glad to hear that, Minister. Before I ask you the next question, allow me to go on a bit of a rant as I set it up. I remember years ago, and it was a long time ago, when I used to read the news. One of the things that bothered me the most was when we would end a sentence on a criminal being released and say, police say he is at a high risk to reoffend. And I'd always think to myself, well, then why are we releasing him? It doesn't make any sense. I've heard Mike Ellis talk about this, or many times, the fact that we're releasing, dangerous people into society. So that tying into this question, how do we target the criminals, the bad guys, and not the legal gun owners here?
Yeah, well, look, you've hit the nail on the head. Time and again, for years now, we've been saying the same thing, that the catch and release programs of the federal government, the lax bail and sentencing laws in our criminal codes need to change. And the fact of the matter is that we've not seen the movement from Ottawa to address these issues. The motion that we have before us does a few things. It directs the Minister of Public Safety, Minister Ellis, to notify law enforcement agencies that going after law-abiding firearms owners is not our top priority. It never was, and it never will be. Our priorities lie with dealing with the real criminals. As Attorney General, I've issued guidelines concerning self-defense protocols here in this province, and our expectation is that Crown prosecutors will adhere to those guidelines when dealing with self-defense cases. It's our expectation that Albertans should know that they are entitled to use reasonable force to defend themselves and their loved ones from intruders. And it's my expectation, again, that the Crown prosecutors will use the guidelines that I've issued with the new factors that I've included in those for consideration before making any decisions to interfere with lawful, honest homeowners in protecting themselves or their families.
Amazing that we even have to clarify that.
We want our police and we want our prosecutors to focus on the real criminals. We don't want them to focus and target hunters and farmers and sport shooters. That is what makes up a lot of our Alberta culture and identity. And we think that those are the honest, hardworking, salt of the earth people here in Alberta that deserve a government that stands by them. That is the government of Alberta's position, but it certainly hasn't been the same from our federal counterparts.
Exactly. And on your second point, as a father of three, I can tell you how every father feels about what they would have to do to defend their kids and wife should somebody break into their home. So thank you for that as well. And the Premier has been clear. Let's talk about the Justice Statutes Amendment Act. You also introduced it this week. Boy, there's a lot there. So maybe I'll get you to touch on a couple of things. Let me see. The legal aid. A big impact on legal aid. Also, the Citizens Initiative, I think, is something you should cover.
Yeah, most certainly. Happy to. Part of my mandate, a significant portion of my mandate, has been to explore a number of policies that improve access to justice here in Alberta. And we know that legal aid is fundamentally one of the best ways that we have to make sure that Albertans have access to justice, have access to legal representation, and are able to make their cases in court. And so the Justice Statute Amendment Act will codify our relationship with legal aid. It will signal our commitment to making sure that legal aid continues to prosper for years to come. And I think that it is welcome news for all Albertans, and certainly is for me as well. I'm very proud of that particular piece of the legislation. The other thing is the Citizen Initiative Act and the referendums. We're going to see a little bit of changes there as well. The whole purpose of a citizen-led initiative is to make it easy for citizens to raise important questions about things that concern them here in Alberta. And what we've seen is that it's become a little bit more difficult than we've initially anticipated. So we're going to make it easier for Albertans to bring important issues to the forefront, to have other Albertans weigh in on it, and to bring it to the forefront of public debate. We think that's important, and the Justice Statute Amendment Act provisions will include certain amendments to make that easier.
Our Justice Minister and Attorney General, Mickey Amery. Never a dull moment these days. Minister, thank you for your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you again.
Next up is the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, and that is Rebecca Schulz, who's good enough to join us today. And listen, I won't make any excuses for you, Minister, but I know you, like several others, are battling a flu and cold up there in Edmonton, the Ledge. Thanks for taking some time for us.
My pleasure.
Hey, let's start with the MOU that was signed with Ottawa. Well, much of the talk, of course, is about building a pipeline, getting our product to the West Coast and then on to Asia. The bad laws that have been keeping investment from Alberta, most of them are gone. You were a big proponent of that, trying to get Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister, and Stephen Guilbeault, the former Environment Minister, to get rid of those. So your reaction to that, first of all, I know you worked very hard on that.
You know, I think that's a major win for Alberta. We've been making the case both here but across the country of just about the impacts of these radical ideological laws that are meant to shut in and shut down production. You know, I think about our campaign, Tell the Feds, that was designed to raise awareness of Canadians about the impacts of the net zero power grid regulations that were completely nonsensical. Same thing that we did to talk about the impacts of an emissions cap and how that would make life less affordable and kill jobs across Canada. And so, you know, when I look at this, you know, we pushed so hard to stand up and defend Albertans, you know, against the radical shut in, shut down production agenda of the Trudeau and Guilbeault era. So I think this is a massive win that people across the country are saying, look, we need energy production. We need safe, affordable, reliable energy. We can't have ideological laws like this net zero power regulation and production caps, or I call it the production and prosperity cap, that would kill jobs and cost Canadians more money. So I think, you know, from that perspective, like, this is a massive win. And I know the Premier did a lot of work to make this happen, but it's pretty great to see, especially that net zero power regulation and the oil and gas emissions cap gone.
Yeah, well, let's follow up on it. And listen, you're in the throes of this every day, but I would ask it like this: if I was thinking like an Albertan, well, it's an emissions cap. That's a good thing, right? Reduce emissions. However, the way it worked is it limited production because you could only allow for so many emissions. So therefore, we couldn't increase. Well, I should leave this to you to explain. You'd be far better at it. But you take my point. It was and is indeed a production cap. So I'll let you put that in your words and why it's so important to attract investment to get rid of it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The way this was designed, it was not about emissions at all. This was a production cap that was designed to shut in and shut down production in Canada. It would have had a massive crippling impact on not just the Alberta economy, but the Canadian economy as a whole. The 35% cut by 2030, it wasn't realistic. It wasn't achievable. The technology did not exist. It would have devastated our economy. It would not have made one dent in global emissions. And we did see multiple firms, independent third-party organizations, validating our concerns. That would have cut over 1 million barrels a day by 2030, a 2.1 million barrel cut by 2035, and cost our Canadian economy over 150,000 jobs. And I think that translated into $14 billion a year being lost from the Canadian economy. That again, how that relates with real everyday people, in addition to lost jobs, is that it would leave the average Canadian family with up to $419 less per month to spend on the essentials. Obviously, right now, affordability is a top of mind concern. So, I think industry is very happy to see, I think 7 of the 9 bad laws have been removed so that they can continue to do what they do best, so that we can go back to seeing investment and ramp up our production to meet the demands of safe, affordable, reliable energy. So we are seeing some companies come back and say that, these changes will seriously help with the investment climate in Alberta and Canada, specifically when it comes to energy.
I just knew you would say it better. It's almost as if we're the federal government is stepping on our own hands. It just didn't make any sense. The agreement sets the stage as well for a carve out of the tanker ban. Why is that significant? And I don't know how much you want to dive into this, how deep you want to go, but First Nations are impacted by this. And frankly, there are tankers on that coast already. They're just not Alberta's or Canada's.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, if we can't actually ship our oil and gas to markets, especially the Asian markets, as Premier has commented on, what's the point in building a pipeline? This is a massive roadblock to investment. But also from the environmental perspective, like countries around the world are looking to us to meet their growing energy demands, but they also see the work that we're doing on emissions and conservation and stewardship and value our environmental record. We have some of the most responsibly produced energy in the entire world. We want to get that to market. So, we can't have, and I know the Premier has said this as well, we can't have one province have a veto over the livelihoods of 5 million Albertans. That doesn't make any sense. We absolutely have to mitigate potential risks and concerns. Our government has been having conversations with British Columbia and First Nations, who also will be a huge part of this when it comes to equity partnership. But also, addressing any potential environmental concerns. I would say, based on what we've seen, possibilities of major incidents are pretty small. Deepwater ports provide some unique opportunities for safe passage. And so, even when we look at places like the Port of Vancouver with increased traffic, we haven't seen massive concerning incidents. And so we take our environmental responsibility very seriously, but we do have to get some kind of a carve out if we want to actually see our products meet these markets.
Minister, there are a lot of skeptics on this MOU, and I think rightfully so, justifiably so, the way Alberta has been treated by Ottawa for the last decade, and maybe even longer than that. How do you make sure you hold their feet to the fire? I asked the Premier the same question, but I'm curious from you. How do you make sure you keep the pressure on Ottawa to get this pipeline built?
I think Premier said it best at the news conference that day, where she said, look, at every turn over the last 10 years, we have seen a federal government that has been ideologically driven and unrelenting in their efforts to try to shut in and shut down our major industries. And so what she said that day is trust but verify. Like, this is an amazing first step, seeing 7 of the 9 bad laws repealed. But there's also, a significant amount of work that still has to be done between now and April 1st on some of these outstanding pieces. I think what we're so fortunate to have here in Alberta is a Premier that wakes up every single day looking to put Alberta and Albertans first. And, I believe we're so fortunate to have her leadership at a time like this, leading these negotiations and keeping Albertans, their jobs, their livelihoods, and the overall Alberta and Canadian economies in mind, keeping that in mind in these negotiations. So, I mean, we do know that demand for our energy is growing. It grows every single day. It has to be filled by somebody. In our view, it should be filled with responsibly produced Alberta and Canadian oil and gas, some of the most responsibly produced energy in the world. And the federal government does have jurisdictional control. I mean, we've heard this Prime Minister say he wants Canada to be an energy superpower. And so, we are going to hold their feet to the fire and ensure that that does, in fact, happen, and that we continue to hold them to their commitments. But we've done a lot of great things on this front by working with industry. I would say, industry really values our tier system. They also have really valued Alberta leading the way when it has come to methane emissions reduction. We were able to, by having equivalency and doing it our way as opposed to the federal government's way, we were able to meet our targets, but also do that in a way that cost industry $600 million less than if they had done it the way that the federal government wanted to see this done. So, we're going to continue to advocate both for pipelines and for market access and doubling production, which, the Premier has said is our goal. And that's the right thing to do for Albertans and Canadians.
Well, I was tempted to ask you about the minister, the former minister, Stephen Guilbeault, leaving cabinet with feds. I was tempted to, and then I thought, maybe I shouldn't bring that up. But you may be responsible for that.
I think in many ways he's responsible for this. I mean, he took such an activist ideological position to his portfolio, and I don't think that was a position that served Albertans or Canadians. I think that they call it the lost decade of the Trudeau Guilbeault Liberal government. It really hurt Canadians. Again, from a jobs perspective, from an affordability perspective, there was no common sense. It was completely activist, ideological agendas. And so, we fought back from a policy perspective. But, I think it was great. I mean, to see him step away, I think, his policies and his approach was not good for Canada.
How very diplomatic. I almost called it Premier. Minister of Environment Protected Areas, Rebecca Schulz. As always, thank you, Minister.
My pleasure.
Well, another big part of the MOU that Alberta signed with Ottawa has to do with power and attracting data centers and the ability to power those data centers. We're going to talk more about that with the minister, Nathan Neudorf, about the power-specific portion in just a minute. But first, let's hear more from our technology minister, the Minister of Technology and Innovation, Nate Glubish, with more on his mandate and his ministry's work.
Hi everyone, Nate Glubish here, MLA for Strathcona-Sherwood Park and Minister of Technology and Innovation. Last week, I received a new mandate letter from Premier Danielle Smith. I'm honored to continue serving Albertans, and I'm excited about the work ahead, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. I often say that technology isn't just an industry, it's the future of every industry. And right now, AI is driving some of the most exciting changes we've seen in decades. That's why we launched the AI Academy, a new training program for Alberta's public servants. We're training 7,000 employees in the first year, giving them access to cutting-edge AI tools in a secure Alberta-based environment. This will help reduce wait times, speed up permit approvals, and save money for taxpayers. It's about making government work better for you. We're also working to attract major investment in AI infrastructure. I'm leading Alberta's AI data center strategy, which aims to bring up to $100 billion in investment over the next 5 years. These data centers will be built close to Alberta's natural gas infrastructure, creating new demand for our energy resources. We're thinking outside the box. By converting natural gas into electricity and using that to power AI data centers, we can export AI compute to global markets over fiber optic cables. This is about supporting our energy sector while also building a stronger, more competitive Alberta, one that leads the country in innovation and delivers better services for Albertans. The future is bright, and Alberta is ready to lead.
Well, the program wouldn't be complete without the Minister of Affordability and Utilities joining us. So there is Minister Nathan Neudorf. It's been a while since we've had you on. Good day, Minister. How are things?
Fantastic. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, it's great to be back. It's been a while.
Yeah, listen, a lot of big news that impacts your file. So I wanted to have you on to talk about some of it. The federal clean electricity regulations are gone. For the benefit of those watching, can you explain the impact that will have could have on their electricity bills.
Absolutely. The bottom line for Albertans is that those regulations would likely have cost nearly $30 billion to Albertans to rectify. And at the end of the day, it would have increased our cost of electricity by a staggering 35% and made our power grid 100 times less reliable. That's not me. That's our electric systems operators' analysis of that. So we are saving Albertans a lot of money and keeping the reliability of our grid secure. Huge improvement for us here.
You bet. I've heard you talk a lot about how these CERs, these clean electricity regulations, created a terrible investment environment because nobody wanted to invest. How will the MOU change that? Are you hearing from industry about it already?
Absolutely. Industry is so relieved and excited they can invest again. We're estimating it can unlock about $18 billion of new investment in our province. And that's before we consider the further impact of data centers that now will have a much easier time accessing the power that they need. So that will add to that. Some of our biggest companies like NMAX are saying things that it signals, the end of the CER signals that industry can keep producing. The CEO of Capital Power said this is an absolute game changer for them. There's a lot of relief, a lot of excitement. The future of the economy in this area looks tremendous.
You know, critics and your opposition will say a move back to natural gas production is not wise because they talk about emissions and would rather see renewables. We've seen how that works out when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. But I'll leave it to you to comment on that, and maybe from that perspective, how we're still going to move ahead and meet these targets that were laid out by 2050.
Absolutely. We all know renewables, wind and solar, are a great segment of our grid, but they are intermittent and they don't often work when it's really, really hot or when it's really, really cold, when we need power the most. And in fact, our Alberta Electric System Operator analysis showed that the clean electricity regs would not have reduced emissions anyways, because it just didn't allow for new technology to come into our grid. So we're excited that our electricity emissions have already declined 60% since 2005, and they keep dropping because the market wants to do what's best. Getting rid of the CR allows new industry, new technology to enter our grid, and it's one of the reasons why we're looking at the future of nuclear within the province. It is a great baseload provider of a huge amount of electricity, and it keeps it stable, and it's non-emitting. So we are going to have an all-of-the-above approach. It allows industry to meet the needs of the future. And again, we're seeing interest in investment across the board.
Minister, there is a global race underway right now to attract AI data centers in every jurisdiction. People want to build them. The problem is, one of the problems is that they require immense power to operate. So to that point, how do you intend to address that and attract that investment to Alberta?
Absolutely. I had the honor and privilege last week of bringing forward Bill 8, the Utility Statute Amendment Act, that lays out the rules for data centers and really large load category within our market to bring their own power. And by doing that, it saves Albertans from having to pay for an increased load demand. So they don't have to pay higher power prices because they have to bring their own. And the other thing it does is because we've got great locational signals and cost causation principles, which we passed earlier this year in legislation, these data centers are going to pay their share of transmission costs. Well, when you're talking about one industry or one development using the same amount of electricity as the entire city of Calgary, they would pay an equivalent amount of transmission costs as the entire city of Calgary. That means you, Bruce, and myself, and every single ratepayer in the province will see a dramatic reduction in transmission costs because they're going to bear the costs that's already here and share it amongst more payers. It's going to be a great day for Alberta as we see the development of a new industry, a sharing of costs appropriate to industry, and a booming economy. I look forward to the Alberta Advantage coming back.
All right, listen, one more for you. This is a real softball, but I think it's worth bragging about. How much have you been able to bring electricity prices down for consumers?
Well, from the peak, we brought the regulated rate down by 63%. And in fact, right now, the generation costs in Alberta are amongst the lowest we've ever had in history. Now, people look at their bill and they maybe haven't seen all of that benefit yet because it's stuck in the transmission costs, which were brought here under the NDP. But our new rules are going to make sure that new industry pay their share, and we as Albertan ratepayers see that benefit. Look forward to that in the coming years.
Keep up the good work, Minister. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
The Minister of Affordability and Utilities, Nathan Neudorf, on the Alberta Update. Well, the Minister of Education and Childcare, that would be Demetrios Nicolaitis, with a major announcement this week for mental health supports in K-12 schools, providing $69 million in funding to school boards so they can provide more help for students who need it, and obviously mental health a huge concern. Here is the Minister.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Classrooms are getting more complex, and we're seeing more incidents of aggression almost every day. Teachers and parents have made it clear that this is a growing issue in Alberta schools. A big part of classroom complexity can come from mental health challenges that aren't being addressed. To address this issue and help with classroom complexity and aggression, the Government of Alberta is providing $69 million over 3 years for the Mental Health and Wellbeing Grant. This funding, originally provided in Budget 25, will give schools the tools and resources that they need to support student mental health.
And so much more to come on the education front, of course, with the complexity in the classroom, panels and groups working on how best to address that. Of course, the Premier talked about it a little bit earlier in the program. Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Alberta Update. So glad you could join us. Had a few ministers with us today, and the Premier, of course, where we try to give you a bird's eye view, what your province is up to, what your government is up to. You could find us on all of the socials, on Rumble, on YouTube. Please like and share, and we'll continue to do this when the legislature is sitting, which means we will be back again next week. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.